So you're thinking about putting a carbon footprint number on your product. That's awesome. But, and this is a big but, to make that number actually mean something, you can't just make it up. You need a rule book. And that's what we're going to break down right now, why a shared standard is absolutely critical if you want anyone to trust your claim. Okay, so you do it. You put that carbon label right there on your product. It's a bold move, for sure, but the second you do that, you're inviting one massive question from pretty much everyone, your customers, regulators, even your competitors. So how exactly did you calculate that? And let's say this is the number you came up with, 5.75 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. I mean, it looks super precise, right? Kind of scientific even. But here's the thing. Without a shared, agreed-upon method for how you got it, that number is basically just floating in space. It's a figure, yeah, but it's not a verified fact. And that brings us to the first and maybe most important point here. A number all by itself is pretty much meaningless. For it to have any real value, it has to be backed up by clear, consistent, agreed-upon rules. Just doing your own math in a spreadsheet? Sorry, that's just not going to cut it. And this really gets to the heart of the whole issue. Think about it. If every single brand just makes up its own rules, it becomes the Wild West. You'll have one company that, forgets to include shipping emissions. Another one might decide that packaging doesn't count. The result is just total confusion. Customers have no way to compare products, and the whole idea of a carbon label just falls apart. All that trust? Gone. This is exactly why we have a formal process for this. It's called a Product Carbon Footprint Assessment, or a PCF for short. And you'll see a definition here, but the two most important words are recognized standard. That's the magic ingredient. That's what turns a random number into data that people can actually trust. Okay, so you're convinced. You need a rulebook. But which one do you pick? The great news is you don't have to invent one. There are really two major internationally recognized standards that give you the whole framework. Let's dive in and see what they are. All right, the two big names in the game are ISO 14067 and the GHG protocol. They're kind of like the two giants in this space, and they have slightly different flavors. You can think of ISO as the really strict one. It's super specific, which makes it perfect for public claims, the kind of stuff that has to survive a lot of scrutiny. The GHG protocol, well, it's historically been a bit more flexible, and companies often use it for internal reporting, to help shape their own strategy. Now, the really good news here is that you don't have to stress too much about picking the wrong one for the long term. These two organizations are actually working together right now to harmonize their standards. The goal is to get to a point where it doesn't matter which rulebook you choose, the math will be consistent and you'll get the same credible result. But for right now today, if your goal is to put a label on a product that your customers will see, there is a clear frontrunner. So let's talk about why ISO 14067 is really considered the gold standard for this. So, why all the focus on ISO 14067? Well, like I said, think of it as the super strict auditor. It is the global standard built specifically for products. It has these incredibly detailed, specific requirements, which is exactly what you need if you're making a public claim. And most importantly, the whole thing is designed from the ground up to be verified by an independent third party. Let me be super clear on this. If your plan is to put a label on a hang tag, a number on a box, or a claim anywhere on your website, aligning with the ISO standard is, without a doubt, your safest route to unquestionable credibility. It's how you make sure that when you say a number, that number actually means something real. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on the why you need a standard. Let's switch gears and get practical. What do these rule books actually make you do? What does this process even look like in the real world? Really, following a standard boils down to two absolutely critical first steps. First, you have to define what's called the functional unit. This means you can't just measure a t-shirt. No way. You have to be super specific, like one size medium t-shirt, including its packaging, designed to be washed 50 times. See the difference? Then, second, you have to set your system boundaries. This is basically deciding the exact scope of your measurement. Where does the clock start and where does it stop? And for a claim to be truly transparent, which is what standards like ISO are all about, you're looking at what's called a cradle-to-grave boundary. This means you have to measure everything. Literally from the emissions of growing the cotton, to the factories that spin and sew it, to the ships that distribute it, all the way to the energy your customer uses to wash and dry it, and then finally what happens when they throw it out. The whole shebang. Whew. Okay, so you've done all this hard work, right? You followed the super strict rules, you defined your units perfectly, you tracked emissions from cradle to grave. So what's the big reward for all that effort? Well, it all boils down to one simple, powerful concept: verified trust. You see, the whole point of using a tough standard like ISO isn't just to get a number. The real magic is that it creates a transparent, auditable trail. It lays out all your work so that an external expert, a third party, can come in, look at everything you did, and give it their stamp of approval. And this is what you're really working towards. That moment when a third-party verifier can say, yes, this calculation complies with the global standard. That's it. That's the seal of approval. It's an independent expert confirming that your number isn't just some marketing fluff. It is a solid calculation that follows the rules everyone agrees on. And what do you get from that verification? Trust. Simple as that. Your claim is now rock solid and defensible against any accusations of greenwashing. Your customers can actually believe what you're telling them. And this is a big one, you are getting your business ready for the future. You're preparing for new rules like the EU's digital product passports, which are going to demand exactly this kind of rigor. So, we'll leave you with this final thought. When you put that carbon number on your product, is it just a number you came up with, kind of floating in the air? Or is it the truth, a truth that's been verified and backed by a global standard? Because really, that difference is everything.